What happens when a small, resource-rich African nation decides to challenge the powerful financial giants that have controlled global economics for decades? What if one determined leader dared to say, "No more," to the endless cycle of debt and dependency? Imagine standing against the world's most influential banks and changing the rules of the game forever. Have you ever felt trapped by systems larger than yourself? Have you watched as governments bow to invisible forces, sacrificing the well-being of their people for financial survival? If so, you're not alone. This is the story of Ibrahim Traoré, a visionary leader from the fictional country of Nafara, who refused to accept the status quo. Against overwhelming odds, he took on international financial institutions that had long dictated the fate of developing nations. Traoré's bold actions sparked a movement that challenged the dominance of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, reshaping not just his country's future, but inspiring hope across continents. Stay with us as we dive deep into how one man's courage and conviction turned the tides against decades of economic control, proving that even the smallest voices can echo loudly on the world stage. If you want to hear more stories that reveal hidden truths and inspire change, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and join our community. Your journey into political truth starts now. Nafara, a nation blessed with abundant natural resources, should have been a land of opportunity. Vast mineral deposits, fertile lands, and a vibrant population seemed like the perfect recipe for prosperity. Yet, despite this wealth, Nafara found itself trapped in a relentless cycle of debt and economic hardship. For decades, Nafara relied heavily on loans from global financial institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. These institutions positioned themselves as lifelines for development but came with strict conditions. To receive funding, Nafara was required to implement austerity measures, cutting government spending, privatizing essential services, and opening markets to foreign companies. While these policies were sold as pathways to economic growth, the reality was far harsher for everyday citizens. Public healthcare and education suffered drastic budget cuts. Infrastructure projects, vital for connecting communities and supporting businesses, were delayed or abandoned. Unemployment soared as local industries struggled to compete with cheaper imports flooding the market. This cycle of borrowing and repayment became a trap. Each loan added to Nafara's debt burden, forcing the government to take on new loans just to service the old ones. The country's economic sovereignty was slowly eroded as decision-making power shifted from elected leaders to distant financial institutions. The people of Nafara faced growing inequality, rising poverty, and diminishing hope. Despite the wealth beneath their feet, they watched their nation struggle under the weight of promises that never quite materialized. This is the harsh legacy that Ibrahim Traoré inherited, a legacy of dependency that had kept Nafara shackled for generations. But little did the world know, this story was about to take a dramatic turn. Ibrahim Traoré was born in a small rural town in Nafara, where life was simple but often harsh. The son of a dedicated schoolteacher and a hard-working farmer, he witnessed from a young age the struggles faced by his community: lack of access to quality education, unreliable health care, and the constant shadow of economic uncertainty. These early experiences fueled a determination to create meaningful change. Thanks to his academic excellence, Traoré earned a scholarship to study economics abroad at a prestigious university. There, he gained a deep understanding of global finance and development strategies. But unlike many who embraced traditional economic models without question, Traoré returned home with a critical perspective. He saw how the systems imposed on countries like Nafara often failed to serve the people they claimed to help. Upon his return, Traoré entered the civil service, quickly making a name for himself as a sharp-minded and principled official. His ability to navigate complex financial issues and his passion for public welfare caught the attention of senior leaders. By his early 30s, he was appointed Minister of Finance, a role that placed him directly in the center of Nafara's ongoing economic challenges. However, as global financial pressures intensified, Traoré grew increasingly frustrated. The World Bank and other institutions demanded deeper austerity measures and stricter reforms, even as protests erupted across Nafara's cities. Citizens were growing restless, facing job losses, shrinking social services, and a future clouded with uncertainty. Realizing that the existing path was unsustainable, Traoré made a courageous decision. In 2022, he resigned from his ministerial post and founded a political movement focused on economic sovereignty and social justice. His message was clear. Nafara needed to reclaim control of its future, break free from crippling debt, and invest in its own people. This bold step marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Traoré but for the entire nation. Ibrahim Traoré's political movement was built on a radical vision, one that challenged decades of economic orthodoxy. At its core was the commitment to restore Nafara's control over its finances and development. He promised to renegotiate the country's overwhelming debt, demanding fairer terms that would not sacrifice social programs or national priorities. Rejecting the traditional model of conditional loans, Traoré advocated for investments that empowered local industries and communities. Instead of relying on foreign-imposed austerity, he pledged to channel resources into sectors critical for sustainable growth: education, healthcare, renewable energy, and agriculture. His platform called for a break from dependency on external financial institutions that dictated policy without truly understanding Nafara's unique needs. This message struck a powerful chord with Nafara's citizens, who had long suffered under the weight of debt and neglect. Traoré's call for economic sovereignty gave hope to millions who felt sidelined by previous governments. His vision promised a future where the country's wealth benefited all, not just a privileged few. By 2023, his movement's momentum translated into a decisive electoral victory. As Prime Minister, Traoré wasted no time. He began dismantling entrenched economic policies that had long prioritized debt repayment over human development. His administration set out to revise loan agreements and shift funding toward projects designed by and for the people of Nafara. The reforms sparked resistance from powerful interests, but Traoré remained steadfast. His government embraced transparency and public participation, strengthening the bond between leaders and citizens. What unfolded next would challenge the very foundations of global finance and signal a new era for Nafara. One of the most defining moments of Ibrahim Traoré's leadership came during a regional economic summit, where he took the unprecedented step of publicly confronting the World Bank. In a speech that captured global attention, Traoré accused the institution of fostering dependency and eroding the sovereignty of developing nations like Nafara. He argued that the World Bank's policies, while presented as pathways to development, often trapped countries in cycles of debt and austerity. These policies forced nations to prioritize repaying loans over investing in their people's well-being, leaving essential services underfunded and economies vulnerable. According to Traoré, this system maintained an unequal power dynamic where lenders dictated terms, and borrowers bore the social and economic costs. Central to his challenge was the introduction of the concept of odious debt, debts incurred by previous governments or under unfair conditions that unjustly burden the current population. Traoré asserted that Nafara would no longer honor debts deemed illegitimate or harmful, signaling a selective default that shook the financial establishment. This bold stance sent ripples through international finance circles. Many expected severe backlash, but Traoré's team had prepared alternative plans. Through diplomatic outreach, Nafara secured new lines of credit and investment from emerging economies and private investors willing to support projects without imposing restrictive conditions. These new partnerships allowed Nafara to finance critical infrastructure, social programs, and sustainable energy projects without the usual strings attached. By diversifying funding sources and rejecting the traditional dependence on Western-led institutions, Traoré demonstrated that developing nations could reclaim control over their economic destinies. His defiance inspired other countries facing similar challenges to question the fairness of their own debts and explore alternative paths to development. Traoré's challenge to the World Bank marked a turning point, one that redefined the global conversation about debt, sovereignty, and development. In 2024, Ibrahim Traoré took center stage at the prestigious Global Economic Forum in Geneva, delivering a speech that reverberated across the world. With measured calm and unwavering conviction, he outlined Nafara's bold new economic strategy, one that prioritized the needs of its people over the demands of distant financial institutions. Traoré unveiled a comprehensive plan focused on renewable energy, education, healthcare, and infrastructure development. He emphasized investment in solar and wind power to reduce Nafara's reliance on expensive and environmentally harmful fossil fuels. He highlighted initiatives to improve schools and hospitals, ensuring that growth translated into tangible benefits for citizens. But the heart of his message was a sharp critique of the existing global financial system. Traoré condemned how institutions like the World Bank consistently prioritized debt repayment above human development, forcing nations to choose between servicing loans and investing in their populations. He described this as an outdated model that perpetuated inequality and stifled true progress. Traoré called for a new global economic order, one founded on principles of fairness, respect for sovereignty, and shared prosperity. He urged nations and institutions to rethink their roles and responsibilities, advocating for partnerships that empower countries rather than control them. The speech made headlines worldwide. Media outlets praised Traoré's courage and vision, while developing nations expressed solidarity with his stance. His words ignited discussions about reforming international finance and inspired a wave of support from countries eager to reclaim their economic independence. This moment marked a pivotal shift, an awakening to the possibility that change was not only necessary but achievable. Following his groundbreaking speech and bold policy announcements, Ibrahim Traoré's government moved swiftly to turn vision into reality. Central to this transformation was a commitment to sound governance and effective public administration. The administration overhauled tax collection systems, closing loopholes and improving efficiency to ensure that revenues were fairly and fully collected. Simultaneously, a robust anti-corruption campaign was launched to restore public trust and redirect resources toward national priorities. Social investments became the cornerstone of Nafara's new economic approach. Significant funding was allocated to education and healthcare, improving access and quality across the country. Schools were renovated and expanded, teacher training programs enhanced, and community health centers equipped to serve rural populations more effectively. Energy infrastructure underwent a dramatic overhaul. Nafara invested heavily in renewable sources such as solar and wind, reducing dependence on costly imports and harmful fossil fuels. These projects not only provided cleaner energy but also created thousands of jobs, stimulating local economies and fostering innovation. Agriculture, once neglected under previous policies, saw renewed attention. Government programs supported small-scale farmers with better irrigation systems, access to quality seeds, and training in sustainable farming techniques. These efforts increased food security and boosted rural incomes, helping to reduce poverty in vulnerable areas. Traoré also prioritized regional integration, negotiating new trade agreements that promoted cooperation among neighboring countries. These agreements focused on fair trade practices and reducing barriers, encouraging local industries to flourish within a supportive network. Transparency and community participation became pillars of governance. Public forums and consultation processes were established, allowing citizens to engage directly with policymakers. This inclusive approach strengthened social cohesion and built a sense of shared responsibility for the nation's progress. Through these combined efforts, Nafara began to rebuild not just its economy, but the very fabric of its society, laying the foundation for sustainable growth and a brighter future. Ibrahim Traoré's reforms and bold stance against entrenched financial powers did not go unanswered. The World Bank, along with several Western governments, pushed back hard against Nafara's new direction. Diplomatic pressure intensified with threats to reduce or withdraw aid, an essential lifeline for many programs. International credit rating agencies downgraded Nafara's status, complicating its access to global capital markets and raising borrowing costs. Within Nafara itself, resistance grew among conservative elites and influential business interests who feared losing their grip on power and wealth. These groups saw Traoré's reforms as a direct threat to their privileges. Political opposition leveraged misinformation campaigns to sow doubt and unrest, aiming to destabilize the government's legitimacy. Attempts to undermine Traoré's administration came in many forms, from orchestrated protests to media manipulation. Yet through it all, Traoré remained resolute. He strengthened alliances with neighboring leaders who shared his vision for sovereignty and development, creating a regional bloc that provided political and economic support. At home, Traoré engaged directly with communities, mobilizing grassroots movements to sustain momentum for change. Public forums, transparent communication, and inclusive policymaking fostered widespread trust and participation, making it difficult for opposition forces to gain traction. His resilience in the face of external and internal pressures became a defining characteristic of his leadership. By navigating complex diplomatic and domestic challenges with strategic vision, Traoré ensured that Nafara's path toward independence and growth remained unshaken. By 2026, the impact of Ibrahim Traoré's leadership and reforms became undeniable. Nafara's economy, once fragile and burdened by debt, stabilized and entered a period of robust growth. The country's newfound economic sovereignty allowed it to direct resources toward projects that truly benefited its people. Poverty rates began to decline noticeably as increased investment in social programs improved living conditions. Access to quality education expanded, with more children attending school than ever before. Health indicators improved as clinics and hospitals received better funding and management, resulting in healthier communities across Nafara. The energy sector's transformation proved pivotal. The shift to renewable energy attracted new industries eager to benefit from stable and sustainable power. Manufacturing and technology sectors grew, creating jobs and diversifying the economy beyond traditional resource extraction. Nafara's success sent ripples through the global development community. The narrative that only loans from traditional international financial institutions could drive progress was challenged. Traoré's model showcased the power of alternative financing and sovereign-led development strategies. Inspired by Nafara's example, other developing nations began exploring similar paths, re-evaluating debt agreements, investing in local capacities, and seeking partnerships that respected their autonomy. The global conversation about debt, development, and financial fairness shifted, opening doors for a more equitable future. Traoré's story became a beacon of hope, proving that with vision and determination, nations could reclaim control and chart their own courses toward prosperity. Ibrahim Traoré emerged as a powerful symbol of resistance against economic systems that long favored powerful institutions over the needs of ordinary people. His leadership challenged the very foundations of financial control, inspiring countless others to question the fairness of the global order. As his movement gained momentum, pressure mounted on international financial institutions to reconsider their approaches. While meaningful reform remains a work in progress, Traoré's actions sparked important conversations about sovereignty, equity, and responsibility in global finance. The path ahead is not without challenges. Deep-rooted structures and interests continue to resist change, and many countries still struggle under burdensome debt. Yet, Traoré's legacy offers hope, a reminder that principled leadership, vision, and courage can shift tides even in the most entrenched systems. His story teaches us that real progress requires standing firm in the face of adversity and putting the well-being of people above all else. It is a call to leaders and citizens alike to demand fairness and accountability in the institutions that shape our lives. If this story inspired you, please like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more powerful stories that reveal hidden truths and spark meaningful change. Together we can learn, grow, and make a difference.